Michael Torres scored 199 points on Family Feud Fast Money, 1 point short of the 200 he needed to win $20,000 for his 7-year-old daughter's chemotherapy. When Steve Harvey turned to look at the big red board and saw that final number flash, Michael's knees buckled, and he grabbed the podium with both hands to keep from hitting the floor. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. He'd driven 847 miles from a small town outside Toledo, Ohio, to make it to that taping, because the next chemo appointment was in 4 days, and the hospital had stopped accepting his payment plan. Steve stared at the board, then at Michael, then at the camera. And the veteran host, who had hosted 2,847 episodes of this show, set his cue cards down on the podium and walked across the stage in a way the producers had never seen him walk before. "Stop the taping," Steve said into his microphone. "Stop everything, right now." The audience of 203 people went completely still, and what Steve Harvey did in the next 11 minutes would be watched by 340 million people around the world. It was a Tuesday morning, October 14th, 2025, at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta, Georgia. The Torres family from Ohio had been matched against the Whitfield family from South Carolina, a retired pastor and his 4 grown children who had driven up the night before. Both families had been laughing in the green room an hour earlier, taking photos together, promising to stay in touch after the show. Michael had his daughter Sophia's drawing tucked into his shirt pocket, a picture she'd made of the two of them holding hands under a rainbow. He kept touching his chest every few minutes, making sure it was still there. His younger brother Daniel stood beside him on the Torres family side, his mother Rosa, his aunt Teresa, and his cousin Javier filling out the 5. They had coordinated blue shirts the night before at a Walmart in Kentucky because Sophia had told them blue was her lucky color. But nobody in that studio knew what was about to happen. What nobody knew, including the Whitfield family standing across from him, was that Michael Torres had not had a full night of sleep in 11 weeks. Sophia had been diagnosed on August 2nd, 2025, with a form of acute lymphoblastic leukemia that required an aggressive treatment protocol her local hospital in Toledo couldn't provide. The pediatric oncologist had referred them to a specialized center in Cincinnati, 2 hours away, where the treatment existed, but the insurance didn't cover it. Michael worked as a forklift operator at a warehouse outside Toledo, earning $47,000 a year before taxes. His wife Elena had died in a car accident 4 years earlier when Sophia was 3. It had been just him and Sophia ever since. The first insurance denial came on August 19th. The second came on September 3rd. The third, after Michael hired an appeals specialist using money borrowed from his brother, came on September 28th, with 4 words that Michael would read over and over again that night. Deemed experimental, not covered. The specific protocol Sophia needed, a combination therapy that had shown 94% success rates in children her age, was classified by his insurance company as investigational. The fact that 3 major children's hospitals considered it standard of care meant nothing. The fact that the Cincinnati oncologist had written a 7-page letter explaining the medical necessity meant nothing. Denied. 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 Michael sold his truck on October 2nd for $4,200. He sold his wedding ring, the one Elena had picked out at a pawn shop in Toledo 2 months before she died, for $380. He took out a loan against his 401k for $8,700, which was all that was in it after 4 years of contributions. He applied for 6 medical grants, received 3, and they covered a total of $3,100. He needed $47,000 for the first round of treatment alone. He was $31,000 short the week before he drove to Atlanta. On October 10th, he called his mother Rosa and told her the treatment had been approved and the insurance was covering everything. He didn't want her to worry. She had a heart condition herself and lived on a fixed income. He told Sophia the same thing that night when he tucked her into her hospital-owned hair cap, the pink one with the small embroidered stars. "Everything's handled, Peanut. Daddy got it figured out." She had looked up at him with eyes that were too big for her shrinking face and said the sentence he would carry with him for the rest of his life. "Daddy, why do you cry when you think I'm sleeping?" He had thought he'd been so careful. He only cried in the hospital parking lot, with the engine off, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. He only cried in the shower, with the water on high. He only cried after she was asleep, in the kitchen with the dishwasher running to mask the sound. But she had known. Of course she had known. Children always know. Family Feud had been a long shot. He'd applied on a whim, 9 months earlier, before the diagnosis, when things had still been normal. The call came on October 6th, 4 days after he sold his truck. Auditions in Atlanta. The family had 72 hours to confirm. Michael sat at the kitchen table that night with Sophia's medical bills spread out in front of him and did the math in a spiral notebook. Fast Money paid $20,000 to winners who hit 200 points. If he won, combined with what he'd already scraped together, he could afford the first full round of chemotherapy. He could buy her the time she needed for the next appeal. He could keep her alive for 3 more months while he figured out the rest. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. He drove to Atlanta on October 13th. He left Sophia with his mother and promised he'd be back by Thursday. He did not sleep on the drive down. He couldn't afford a hotel, so he parked the rental car, a white Toyota Corolla, in the lot of a 24-hour Waffle House in Marietta, and sat up all night with Sophia's drawing on the dashboard and prayed. He was not a religious man, had not been to church since Elena's funeral, but that night in the Waffle House parking lot, he prayed out loud for the first time in 4 years. "God, if you're real, just let me get the 200. Just this one thing. I'll do anything. I'll never ask again." The regular rounds of Family Feud went as normal. The Torres family won the first face-off. The Whitfields took the second. Back and forth. Steve cracking jokes. The audience laughing. Michael smiling politely but barely hearing any of it, his hand constantly going to his shirt pocket where Sophia's drawing was folded against his heart. The Torres family won the final round by 43 points. They were going to Fast Money. The audience roared. Michael's brother Daniel hugged him so hard he lifted him off the ground. Michael volunteered to go second. His Aunt Teresa went first and scored 112. A decent number. Solid. It left Michael needing 88 points to hit the magic 200. He walked to the podium. He felt his legs shaking. He felt Sophia's drawing against his chest. He looked at Steve. Steve looked back. Something in the older man's eyes registered that the energy on that stage was different, that this wasn't a normal Fast Money round, but he couldn't have known why. Michael Torres was carrying a secret that would soon change everything. The questions came. Michael answered as fast as he could. Steve's voice faded into the background. His own voice sounded like it was coming from somebody else. Name something a woman might do to her hair. Cut it. 27. Name a fruit that's always red. Strawberry. 41. On and on, the numbers ticking up in the corner of the screen. When the final question came, and Michael gave his last answer, the big red board lit up and the audience gasped. The studio fell completely silent. 199. Michael stared at the number. He stared at it for a long time. His brain didn't process it at first. 199. 1 point short. His knees buckled, and he gripped the podium. He did not cry. He did not make a sound. He just stood there, staring at the number that meant his daughter wouldn't get her treatment, that meant the drive home would be the longest drive of his life, that meant the phone call he would have to make to the Cincinnati hospital on Friday morning. And that's when Steve Harvey walked across the stage. "Stop the taping," Steve said. "Stop everything." A producer off stage started waving her arms. Another producer spoke into his headset, urgent, panicked. Steve held up one hand. "I said stop. Stop the cameras. Stop the audience. Nobody moves." The studio fell completely silent. Steve walked up to Michael, who was still gripping the podium with both hands. Steve looked at him, then down at the shirt pocket where the corner of Sophia's drawing was sticking out. He had noticed it all night. He had wondered about it. Now he reached out with 2 fingers, slowly, and pulled the folded paper from Michael's pocket. He looked at it. A little girl and her daddy under a rainbow. He looked back up at Michael. "Who is she?" Steve asked quietly. Michael's face cracked. 41 years of holding everything together cracked right there on the stage of Family Feud. He opened his mouth to speak, and nothing came out. He tried again. "My daughter, Sophia. She's 7. And why is she so important?" And that's when Michael told him. Standing at the Fast Money podium, with 203 audience members watching, with the Whitfield family watching, with 47 crew members watching, with the cameras still rolling because Steve had told the producers to keep rolling, Michael Torres told Steve Harvey about the leukemia, about the insurance denials, about the $47,000, about Elena dying 4 years ago, about Sophia's pink hat with the stars, about the prayer in the Waffle House parking lot. He told him in a voice that shook so hard it was barely a voice. And when he finished, the studio fell completely silent. Steve did not speak for a long moment. He walked to the edge of the stage. He looked out at the audience. He looked back at Michael. Then he took off his own microphone and held it down at his side so the cameras had to record what he said without studio polish. "Let me tell you something, Michael. 22 years ago, I was you." Michael looked up. "Not with a sick child, thank God, but I was broke. I was so broke I was living in my 1976 Ford Tempo. I was showering in gas station bathrooms. I was eating out of trash cans behind restaurants. For 3 years I lived in that car. And one night, at a gas station in Cleveland, an old man walked up to me and said, 'Son, God's got a plan bigger than your pain.' And I held on to that. I held on to that for years, because nobody helped me at my lowest. Nobody. And I promised God that if He ever got me out of that car, I would spend the rest of my life helping people like me. People at the bottom. People 1 point short." Steve paused. He put his hand on Michael's shoulder. "Michael, I'm not going to let you be 1 point short." The audience made a sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite a cry. The Whitfield family, across the stage, was already wiping their faces. Steve turned to a producer and snapped his fingers. "Get me my phone, right now." But Steve wasn't done. "Nobody calls during a taping," Steve said, his voice rising. "In 15 years of hosting this show, I have never once stopped a taping to make a phone call. But we are stopping it today. Because some rules are stupid rules, and some rules exist to be broken. And today, we are breaking the rule." The producer brought his phone. Steve scrolled through his contacts. He put the phone on speaker and held it up to the microphone so the entire studio could hear it. It rang twice. Dr. Patricia Hammond's office. Patty, it's Steve Harvey. I need you to clear your schedule. I've got a family who needs you. Dr. Patricia Hammond was the chief pediatric oncologist at Children's Hospital Atlanta, one of the top 3 pediatric cancer centers in the United States. Steve had her on speed dial because he had started the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation 9 years earlier, and she had sat on the medical advisory board. Right there on the stage, with 203 audience members listening in silence, Steve explained the situation: the leukemia, the denial, the $47,000, the $199. Dr. Hammond was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Bring Sophia to Atlanta. We'll start Monday. The foundation covers everything." Michael dropped to his knees. Not theatrical, not for cameras. His legs simply stopped working. Daniel ran from the Torres family line and caught him. The Whitfield family was openly weeping. Steve looked at the camera. "Everyone watching at home, I need you to hear me. There is a man right here, standing on this stage, who did everything right. He worked. He raised his daughter alone. He prayed. He drove 847 miles with no sleep, and he came up 1 point short. Now, I don't believe in a God who lets a man come up 1 point short. So today, we are making it 200. Steve turned back to Michael, who was still on his knees. "Stand up, son. You won the 20,000. Michael shook his head. "I scored 199, Steve." "You scored 200 in my book. Stand up." But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the Whitfield family. "I need to talk to y'all real quick. Y'all came here today to try to win some money, and you got beat fair and square. I can see on your faces you ain't mad. You're crying like the rest of us. So I want to offer you something." Steve paused. "I want to give y'all the fast money $20,000 too. Today, nobody leaves this stage empty-handed." Pastor Whitfield stepped forward from his family's line. He was 71 years old. He had been a preacher for 44 years. He looked at Steve, then at Michael, and he shook his head. "Mr. Harvey," Pastor Whitfield said, his voice thick, "with all respect, I don't want that money. Give it to Sophia. Add it to whatever y'all are doing. Our family is blessed. We're healthy. We got enough. Please, give it to that little girl." The studio fell completely silent. Then the audience erupted. 203 people standing, crying, clapping. The Torres and Whitfield families walked toward each other in the middle of the stage and embraced. Strangers an hour earlier, now something else entirely. The crew was openly crying. The camera operators, the lighting techs, the sound engineers, Steve's own assistant. Everyone. Steve stood there with tears running down his face and simply said 5 words that would become the most quoted 5 words of his entire broadcasting career. "This is why we're here." The episode aired 3 weeks later, on November 6, 2025. By the end of the first 48 hours, it had been viewed 89 million times on YouTube. By the end of the first week, it had crossed 200 million views across all platforms. The final number, as counted by Nielsen and YouTube combined 90 days after air, was 347 million views worldwide. The hashtag 1 point short trended on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for 18 consecutive days, the longest any Family Feud hashtag had ever trended. Donations began pouring into the Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation within hours. By the end of the first month, the foundation had received $14.2 million in donations, earmarked specifically for what became known as the Sophia Fund, named after the little girl with the pink hat and the starred drawing. Sophia Torres started treatment at Children's Hospital Atlanta on November 3, 2025. a full 3 weeks before the episode even aired. By February 2026, 3 months into the protocol, she was in partial remission. By June 2026, full remission. By October 2026, 1 year after her father's drive to Atlanta, her oncology team declared her cancer-free. The Sophia Fund, which had started with Steve's personal commitment of $100,000, grew to over $40 million within the first year, and has to date funded treatment for 1,847 children whose families were told their treatment was experimental and denied coverage. Dr. Patricia Hammond became the fund's medical director. She told a reporter, "We are doing in 1 year what I thought would take us 20, because of a man who came up 1 point short." Michael Torres quit his forklift job in March 2026. Steve hired him personally as a family liaison for the Sophia Fund, a position that paid more in a month than Michael had made in a year. His job was to sit with families whose insurance had denied them, look them in the eye, and tell them the story of his 199. He has now sat with 612 families. Every one of them has received treatment. The Whitfield family was flown to Los Angeles 6 months after the taping. Steve gave Pastor Whitfield a $50,000 gift for his church's homeless outreach program. He gave each of the 4 Whitfield children $10,000. Pastor Whitfield cried at the altar the first Sunday he told his congregation what had happened. He said in an interview later, "I didn't give up that money. I invested it in a little girl. I got back more than money could ever be." Steve Harvey, in an interview with Oprah Winfrey in January 2026, was asked about the moment he stopped the taping. He thought for a long time before answering. He said, "I have hosted over 3,000 episodes of that show. I have seen families win, I have seen families lose. But that was the day I understood why I was there. Not to host a game, to be in a position to say yes when a father needs a yes. That's the whole job." On a Tuesday morning in October 2026, 1 year exactly from the day Michael Torres walked onto the Family Feud stage, a little girl named Sophia Torres, 8 years old, with her hair grown back in soft, dark curls, sat at a kitchen table in a new house in a small town outside Toledo, Ohio. She was drawing a picture. It was a little girl and her daddy, holding hands under a rainbow. And in the corner of the picture, in careful 7-year-old handwriting that had become 8-year-old handwriting, she had written 3 words. "Thank you, Steve." Sometimes a man drives 847 miles on no sleep and comes up 1 point short, and the world decides that 1 point short is close enough. Sometimes the distance between losing and winning is one stranger who remembers what it felt like to have nobody. And sometimes the most important thing a person can ever do is stop. Just stop everything and make the phone call. If this story moved you today, take 1 second to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another moment like this one. Share this video with someone who needs to believe that good still exists in the world. And tell us in the comments where you were watching from, because Sophia's story belongs to everyone now.